Welcome to EnVision Center News, where we discuss community impact and involvement with today's nonprofit leaders and philanthropists. Today I'm here with Josh Rasmussen.
Perfect.
Okay, and Dante Rumore. And both of these fellows met here at the EnVision Center in October at an event that we had for veterans and their service providers. And they are here speaking on behalf of the North Idaho Veterans Coalition. And I'd like you guys to just kind of take it from here. Tell me what this organization is and who's all part of the coalition.
Yeah, well, so we boiled it down to North Idaho Veterans. At first it was North Idaho Coalition, for lack of a better name. But then as we kind of went down and we found a website finally, we boiled it down to North Idaho Veterans. And I was aware of Josh and Neil and Warriors Rest and the work they were doing well before I met them. And some of the seeds for what we have going on now were planted before the spin meeting. But we hadn't actually got together until the spin meeting. Mm-hmm. So we came here for the spin meeting, was the first face-to-face introductions, and that really started the ball in motion to get the North Idaho Veterans program going. So shortly after that, we started scheduling our first meeting. And the idea originally, was loose, but was just to get us all together in the same room. Mm. And so once we sat down in the same room for our first meeting, which was high energy and a lot of similar mindsets, the North Idaho Veterans program, it started rolling, and we started putting the vision together. We're still really building the vision, but ultimately, my perspective of what we're doing is we're bringing together like-minded people with a similar mission to both get the word out of what all the different organizations are doing, to be able to cross-pollinate. So if a veteran gets introduced to Warriors Rest, then that pretty much automatically gets them introduced to the whole rest of the group and the organizations that are involved. Mm-hmm. And I know we'll probably get down there, but we're already starting to see the benefit. I just got back. I've had several events already this week. And at one of the events, a veteran was telling me that he'd never heard of Veterans Community Response, which is one of our organizations. They did a ski day on Tuesday, and one of the veterans there found out about it through Idaho Backcountry Veterans, which is another one of the organizations. And by the time he left that event, he already knew about Warriors Rest, and now he knows about Veterans Community Response, and he already knew about Idaho Backcountry Veterans. But that idea, now that veteran went from knowing about Idaho Backcountry Veterans to knowing about several other organizations with programs going on in the area. And I think just the other piece to note, initially with this first question is when we talk about being like-minded, we are all very active and engaged. We're creating programs that are directly involving the veteran. So that's kind of part of our identity, is that the organizations involved are very active, very direct service, and very getting veterans involved in activities, in programs, indirectly, in things, in events or activities that directly get them engaged. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Warriors Rest, we always had an initiative to partner people together. And I think there's a misnomer out there that if you pool a bunch of resources, then they get less, right? But it's actually the opposite, because it generates momentum. And as we started working more directly, we saw that there was a little bit of a gap so as culture has shifted, the way that veterans engage with other veterans or that they see services, there was kind of a gap in that from the older ways. And so although those were valuable and they provided great services, we now noticed that veterans were kind of floating. And so one of the biggest things for veterans is camaraderie, brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And so it really just falls in line with that. And so for us, we always are trying to look for task and purpose outside of being over the wire, downrange, or on mission, because when you're doing that, it's natural because you have a task and a purpose. Yeah. And then when you come back and you're just floating, it's hard to find all those things that really deep down for us in our hearts and our minds is really important. And so for me, it's been a bit of a learning curve not being a veteran, and then just working with this community for the last 10 years. But actually having gone all over the world and done stuff for missionary work and being in crazy positions and stuff like that. And then just knowing that when you confront evil on the front lines, it takes a toll on you and your family. Mm-hmm. And so Warriors Rest has always been about building community. So we were actually on a trip to Wyoming to do an interagency training, and Chris from Idaho Backcountry Veterans and XSA was there. And we're like, and he had been talking to Dante, and we're like, hey, well, let's just get it going. Warriors Rest will fund the first barbecue. Mm-hmm. Let's make it happen. And then, of course, Linus, being Linus, jumped in, was like, we'll do one too. And that kind of initially got the ball rolling. I think at the last meeting, it really kind of landed on the whole point of this is for us to break bread together and hang out and do life together and do what we do together. And then naturally out of that, it's drawing people in. Yeah. And I think the ball will get rolling a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But I think that was more of the genesis for us as we were getting involved.
Yeah. And I think like how I'm in, like the image I'm putting to it is like, if you picture a wheel, where right now this hub we're creating, the center of the wheel is North Idaho Veterans, and then it has a lot of spokes that break off of that. Mm-hmm. And those are the different organizations. So outside of the meetings where we are breaking bread together and talking about what we have going on and seeing what each organization could use, we're also building this hub, which is going to be primarily based around a website where any veteran in North Idaho can go to and see all of the different activities that each organization has going on. And I've been deeply involved in the veteran services in North Idaho for 13 years, and I'm still learning, like, I didn't know all the stuff that Warriors Rest has going on. And there's several events that Idaho Backcountry Veterans doing that aren't on my radar. And so getting that all together, where a veteran who's like, well, what's going on in my community can go to this website, and we're all putting our stuff on this calendar, and then they can see how they can get involved with it, as well as, if I have an event going on with the various organizations I'm involved with, I can send out a flyer to Warriors Rest. Warriors Rest can distribute it to their groups that they're involved with, and we're just getting the word out. Right. And it's really just, again, it's multi-layered, but it's building connections between the organizations, which then gets the veterans more connected. So we're getting veterans more connected to everything.
Absolutely. I love it. I think what you guys are doing, it makes so much sense for, keeping people out of silos. Like, it's just easy for organizations to, like, this is what I do, and this is, all we need to be involved in because we serve this community. And it's easy to become, like, I don't know, short-sighted, but what you're doing is breaking down those walls and finding ways to communicate. And then, Josh, when you were talking, it reminded me of something that you had wrote in your questionnaire. And I think it's your slogan for Warriors Rest is finding direction through connection.
That's actually that's what came up in our meeting right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was
I just think it's beautiful. Because like all of the information that you pool with, the veterans themselves and through all these different organizations, it like gives you this pathway and this direction to get people connected, both like on that physical, deep emotional part, and then to nature and to all of the things that North Idaho has to offer. So who are some of those partners that you guys have in the coalition right now?
Well, there's Warriors Rest, there's North Idaho Backcountry Veterans, there is,
we got Veterans Community Response. We have a couple businesses that have showed up. We have a few individual veterans who are showing up. Then they have me in my, so I'm there representing the Vet Center, which is a federal agency that focuses on the readjustment of combat veterans and military sexual trauma, Gold Star families, and active duty that's deployed. We're constantly in communication with other organizations that we're bringing in. We got MTB 0311B.
Yeah, Devon's. That was
Devon.
Yep.
And it's, so they're primarily focused on mountain biking, snowboarding right now. They've been heavily in getting some veterans snowboarding already this year.
Weekly. Yeah, they're getting together weekly.
So.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like I was saying in the questionnaire, we're this is our third month. And so it's been really a natural progression. It hasn't been forced. And that's a good thing, because I think, especially if you're hurting or you're healing, those type of things tend to push people off. And so just having a bunch of people that are just getting together because they're getting together.
Yeah.
Isolation is like one of the first steps, and there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath isolation that's just not good.
Right.
And it's like one of those first stops on that downward spiral. And so really having something compelling that isn't like, we're going to fix you.
Right.
For them to join in and be a part of and feel like they fit and that they can be themselves, that's a big one.
Yeah.
It's like they can talk like they want to talk. That might scare other people. But that's kind of one of the cool benefits we've seen really early on, is that it's been pretty natural. And I think we all have we have a very similar approach to what we're doing. It's more about what can we do in the earth rather than let's put microscopes on people. And I think there's a place for that, but we all tend to be walking alongside people more than turning and, analyzing or trying to fix them.
Yeah. I really feel that from you guys too, sitting here, just this like calm and this peace, which is very cool. It's not like you're pushing any sort of programming or any sort of like nothing. I just feel this like absolute love from you guys that wants to just pour out on whoever comes in your path. And that's really remarkable and beautiful.
Yeah. And when you get a group of people together that share that, or, kind of project that. I told my wife when I got back from the first meeting, because I've done a lot of stuff in my career, and I was like, this is one of the most rewarding things I've done. And just that first meeting where we were breaking bread, we had some delicious food, we had great conversation. I was kind of tasked with facilitating. So it's like kind of drawing it back to the intention, but also letting it drift, because you're seeing the smiles and the communication. And I know pretty much everyone in the room, so I know that they're not always smiling like that, and I know they're not always that passion, like letting that passion out, and so that here's something we have a shared passion for, and we're all kind of letting it out in a very like healthy, functional manner that gives it a sense of direction on how we're going to use that. And another piece that's really important to me with North Idaho Veterans is that my whole career I've operated under the mindset that we can get a lot done if it doesn't matter who gets the credit. And I've done a lot of work that's been disappointing with other organizations, because at the end of the day, it was apparent that they wanted to get credit for what was going down. And there's zero of that. I mean, it's like if you could look at like whatever the opposite of that is, that's what we're doing here. We're just,
awesome.
No one's trying to get credit. No one's trying to put their organization or their individual
philosophy or way of doing it.
Yeah. It's wild, just to sit down with a group of good people with good energy that there's very little, say ego in it, where we're trying to build ego. No, we're just trying to work together. We're trying to create something that is, in my mind, very unique to have a community that has this network that we're building to really support our veteran population.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you guys both mind taking a moment to tell me a little bit about your past and what led you here, and how your career has changed and shifted and kind of brought you to this moment?
Okay. Well, 3 years ago, Neil and I started Warriors Rest. I had just gotten off. I worked for a large international missions organization as a chief development officer. And I had been on the field for like 13 years straight. And I looked at my wife and I was like, I need a break. And then Neil called an hour later. He's like, do you need a break? You want to go to North Idaho? And so we were down south and we came up here. And on that trip, we started talking a lot about our communities. And we noticed that in both of our communities, when we were on mission, everything worked out really well. We had focus, and I mean, there were still problems, but there was a clear focus. But then when we would get back, you know, my community with people that work internationally, they tend to come back and they'll go to church and people are just sitting there and they get real pious and bitter. Or they get really uppity and above it all. And then he was talking about in the veteran, it's very like his community would be like they'd find a hobby and they'd crush a hobby, or they'd crush a bottle, or they would tear up their families because they were just so used to doing it a certain way. And we found that there was a lot of events, there was a lot of programs, and there was a lot of therapies, but there wasn't any community outside of the mission. And so we said, well, those people are all doing that. So maybe we can fill that gap and just start helping people find community the way they did downrange or for us on mission. And that's what we started. So we just started breaking bread once a week, and then we'd invite people into that. And out of that simple, we called it a Sabbath feast on Saturdays, a couple of churches got planted, 4 or 5 organizations started. And we just saw all this stuff happening from that. And we said, there's something to this. So let's just keep doing that. And so when we have guys that come up with Warriors Rest, Neil obviously comes from a veteran. We get sent emergency and pretty difficult cases from active duty and retired. And so his 20 years of doing what he did in the Navy. And then for me, I've been a pastor, a missionary for the last 16 years. Wasn't that way till 30. Kind of a crazy long story before that. But, and so our two worlds kind of came together as we sit with people and just say, so what's happening? What's going on? And then we start with, like, hey, we can't fix ourselves. So we can't fix you, but we can walk with you in it. And you can be yourself. And then we can, almost die together. We can laugh really hard and we'll probably get some stuff accomplished. And then in that process, then you find meaningful relationship because you can be yourself.
Right.
And you can be open.
That amount of trust that has been built by not no expectations are set on them. You just are there for these ups and downs, and then things just come out of that naturally.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're always very focused on moving ourselves, so that we have something to invite the guys into. And so that what they see is, and so they usually eat in our homes and hang out with our kids. And so we say, hey, look at our life. We're about to tell you a bunch of stuff that are a possibility, but watch us for a few days, come do what we do, and then see if, what we say in our mouth matches what we live. And then, take what's valuable, and then there's no ending to what we do. So they're always in the community. And there's no certificates or graduation. It's just you're around until you're not.
Your family till you
your
don't want to
family.
be.
And so it's kind of this open-ended thing. We don't know what that looks like in 25 years, but right now we can manage that at 3 to 4 years I think we're at around 60 guys at this point.
Wow.
We had in just January, in the first 14 days, we had 14 guys.
Are those 60 people here in North Idaho?
No. Okay. These are all people that have come. A lot are out of San Diego, out of Neil's community. But there are some here in North Idaho. We just met with a guy from Fairchild Air Force Base. He's an engineer, but he's going through it with his family. And so Neil and we drove out to Spokane and spent the day with him, just kind of hearing him out. He's like, you're not going to fix me. I was like, you're right. But so what's going on? And so we just, in our way that we do things, we just kind of push into them and say, hey, what's really going on? What does that mean when you say that? You know, questions. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so we work in our community. That's a much longer story, but we've started several organizations to do different things here because we believe that building the community you're in, if we're going to invite people into that, the stronger that is, the more impact it'll have on those individuals.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess the best place for me to start with my story would be my military service. I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps. Half of that was pre 9/11. Half of that was after 9/11. And so I ended up, shortly after 9/11, I got stationed in Colorado, where there's a very few Marines on Buckley Air Force Base. And wasn't necessarily what I wanted to be doing during my service. It's just where I ended up. And then part of that was doing funerals in color guard for the Marine Corps. And while I was there doing funerals in color guard, most of my buddies, because I joined the military from my two years of graduating high school classes with a relatively large group of people that I knew. So there's, I think about 12 of us, including me, like I said, graduating in 98 and 99, went into the military. So then here I am in Colorado doing funeral and color guards, not deploying, while all my buddies that from those high school classes were pretty much deployed. I think of that group, only one other guy didn't deploy. And then a bunch of the people I'd met during service had deployed. And then we were doing funerals for, Vietnam veterans, World War II veterans, a lot of those things, which were real meaningful, but also Marines that were killed in action. And one funeral that stuck with me in particular was a Marine that had deployed twice, which was early on, so it must have been back to back because it's still like 2003 or 2004. And after a second deployment, he took his own life. And so I remember viscerally, like it's in my bones, of going to these funerals for these guys killed in action, and they were huge. At the time, it was still a big deal. Yeah. And so we'd go there, and there'd be like local news and CNN and Fox, and their governors or senator would come talk for the guys killed in action. But here I'm sitting at this funeral for a Marine who had 2 deployments and killed himself, and there's like 10 people there, and like, and I just remember standing there, that's part of my job. I was standing there next to the coffin, draped with a flag, and the whole time I was thinking, like, this is not right. Like, that here, this guy, whatever happened during his deployments, was stuff that he didn't necessarily know how to handle, and probably a young guy, and it's just a funny element of his mom looked just like my mom. So I'm just sitting there. There's just a weird experience, an intense experience. Folded his flag, did the whole thing and left. Because when we do these killed in action, we'd have the 21 gun salute, we'd have pole bearers, the whole deal. And this was just like a show up, hear the story, hand the flag to the mom, and then we're out. And so that really stuck with me. And the fact that all my buddies deployed and I didn't deploy, that was like something I carried for a long time. It's not necessarily that I wanted to go to war, but if all your buddies are going to be doing something tough, it's hard to be one of the guys who's not doing it. And then I started watching my buddies come back from war, which was tough too, watching like pretty much 100% of my friends were struggling in some way. And so I pretty quickly when I got out of the Marine Corps in 2004, I went right into school. Wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do, but I knew it was going to be something to help veterans. I was pretty interested in going down exercise science and physical therapy until I took excellent psychology class. So I can't even remember the name of the instructor, but I owe him a lot because sitting in his class, I was like, holy smokes, like this is it. And it's funny, it's one of those things that like the universe creates a path for someone who knows where they're going. And so that was really my experience. Once I decided that's what I was going to do, the doors just kept opening. So I got a degree in psychology, a bachelor's degree in psychology, ended up going, and this was just, again, had a great mentor who said, man, I don't see you being a clinical psychologist. I see you being a clinical social worker. And I didn't even know what that was at the time. So he guided me towards clinical social work. I got my master's in clinical social work. I didn't know what the vet center was until I was an intern at the vet center. And then I found myself sitting in the chair, as a readjustment counseling therapist. That's my job title as an intern. And it was just where I wanted to be. And like I said, I didn't even know it existed. And then so I jumped right in, and then here we are in like 2000, this is like 2009. And now you got lots of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans getting out of service, coming in, finding the vet center. But at the same time, we had a lot of Vietnam veterans who were retiring and had worked 60, 70-hour weeks their whole lives. And now they have all this time on their hand. So the vet center at the time, again, like say 2010, was just busy. And we weren't quite prepared to deal with the amount of veterans coming in. It's, again, coming in from both ends, those just getting out of service and those Vietnam veterans retiring. So it was a really, meaningful time to be coming into the field, to be supporting multiple eras of veterans readjusting after war and figuring out how to navigate life after war. And then again, another thing that I can only give the universe credit for is while I was an intern, a group of firefighters came in and said, we don't know what we want to do. We got some money and we got some energy. We want to help veterans. And so I made a very close relationship with a man named Darren Coldiron, and me and him worked together closely for a decade. Me on the vet center side of the house, him on the nonprofit side of the house, and out of that came Veterans Community Response, which was spun off of his nonprofit that he had doing work over in Sri Lanka after the tsunamis, and they just folded that in and turned it into a nonprofit serving veterans. So we were doing, we got up, starting the first retreat was 2009. Pretty soon we're doing 5 retreats a year. I think we got up to most was like 7 retreats a year. We were doing 4-day retreats, activity-based with a spiritual element. And then every night ended up with me running a fire circle. And then that spun off into all kinds of things. We started a community responder program to get veterans out doing volunteer work, which turned into disaster work. Then we're deploying veterans to disaster zones. And basically if I had an idea pop into my head, I would tell Darren, and Darren would make it happen. And so we did whitewater rafting. We started a ski program. We did several iterations of a mountaineering program. And it worked out really well for me, for a way like, these are things I'm interested in myself. I'm interested in creating for veterans to be involved. But I didn't have to be the expert. I didn't have to be a whitewater raft guide. We'd find one and we'd take them guiding. And I didn't have to be a ski guide. We'd find one. I didn't have to be a mountaineering guide. We'd find one. And so that also just led me to realize the value of community and just getting the community involved. So one of the strengths of my career has been community partnerships. And it's just, again, like, leads back to North Idaho Veterans. The community partnerships are just so valuable. And especially when you find community partners that are like-minded, have good energy, and are not just, I'm not saying easy to work with, it's a joy, it's a pleasure to work with. And then I think then you create this, these relationships that the veterans see, like when you got a civilian that has a huge heart and has something they're sharing, because one of the many little facets of readjustment for a lot of veterans is getting out of this mindset, us and them, where we're veterans, they're civilians, and we don't understand them, they don't understand us. And so those community partnerships have been huge, because a lot of the firefighters that come out and early on were not veterans. A lot were veterans, but a lot weren't. And a lot of the community partners we worked with, whitewater rafting guides, mountaineers, weren't veterans. So it really helped bridge that gap. So, I guess that's the general overview of what brought me to North Idaho Veterans and how I ended up here. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Do you want to just briefly talk about that gap between being a veteran and not a veteran, Josh, and your experiences?
Yeah. So when I first started, I just knew, especially in the specific community that we work with, I was friends with a lot of them. I helped a lot of them. I worked with them, and I just knew I'd never be one of them. But one of the things that it does, and Dante just alluded to it, is when they finally let out what it is, and I'm just like, all right, it does something for them, because they think that I'm going to think they're a monster. They're going to think that I don't get it, or that I don't have the same demons running around in me. And so that I've noticed is valuable, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And so I'm always navigating, even in our meetings, I'm always navigating when to speak out of respect for those that and they've earned what they have.
Right.
And so it's always kind of that, how do I fit in that situation? How do I speak confidently of things that have nothing to do with whether or not you're a veteran or not? And I think, as everything it's the relationship. It's time. So it's like, yesterday we work with all kinds of communities. So I was on a boat yesterday with the sheriff's department in Boundary County, and so we're sitting there, and and they kind of know me, but by the end of the day we're laughing, telling, because we were recovering some dive dummy that they lost, and I'm like, funny. Well, now we can write the book Diving for Dummies, and and everybody's cracking up. And so it's really just that, it's the time piece, and then me not, I think the biggest thing for me is to not try to chase my own ego in it, and just say, or try to prove myself,
right?
Because it's just not, I'm not going to have that lived experience. I have my own, and that I just have to be careful not to try to be something I'm not, which the veteran community is really sensitive to anyways. And so I've been lucky that I haven't really struggled with that much. I'm just okay with who I am.
Nice. Yeah.
And if you don't think I'm good to go, then that's fine.
It'll be what it'll be. Yeah, there's a lot of that just in general about like imposter syndrome, or if you have a trauma, sometimes you judge your trauma. It's not as bad as this was, or I didn't serve as long as that person did, or so people kind of we all carry it in some form or fashion.
And so I'll always really early, I'm like, first of all, I'm not a veteran. I just bring it out because I don't want them, because if I don't do that, they'll be tracking with me as if I am.
Yeah.
And then when they find out there's a visible shift in their physiology.
Yeah, sure. It breaks that trust.
As if I've tried to go along with it. So the initial one is like, well, why are you telling me that? It's like, well,
because it's going to
trust me, it's better that I just get this out of the way now, so that you know where to categorize me. And that way you don't think that I'm trying to trade on something I'm not.
Yeah.
So.
All right. I think I have two more questions. Let's see. How about talk about the veterans that are coming to you and that are moving into the area currently? Or you said there's like a little bit of an influx going on, or?
Oh, not necessarily moving into the area, which there are a lot.
Yeah, everybody's moving.
But just, so I'll speak for the Vet Center. We're as busy as we've ever been. And like, for instance, we're already trying to figure out how to keep providing the veterans with the quality of services that we do. And I went into work on Monday, and we had a stack of 20 new intakes to absorb amongst, 7 therapists. And that's not uncommon now. So I think, and it's a bigger conversation, because I think our whole country's now facing a mental health situation, and a lot of people pointing their fingers on it's this or it's that.
Sure.
But I think there's some real solid things that we can point it on, you know, if we could look at. And I think a lot of it is community. It's a lot of it's relationship, a lot of it's lifestyle. You know, maybe if you ask Josh and Neil, a lot of it's probably spiritual. There's probably a lot of layers to it, but and you know, reel me in if this is too far off. But if you were to ask me, like, talk about the most important factor about combat war veterans or veterans and their readjustment, I would tell you it's our culture. Our culture, even though we feel so insightful because we got science and we have all this data and information, I'd say we still approach things in a very adolescent mindset. And there's more, you know, there's ancient cultures that did a better job of welcoming their warriors back home. And I think they even understood the trauma of war better than we do. And so now there's a lot of therapists out there, you know, and the VA's got a lot of therapists, the vet center's got a lot of therapists, but it's so one-dimensional. And I think that's why I love the North Idaho Veterans. It's definitely not one-dimensional. There's multiple dimensions to it. And I think, you know, hopefully before we go off and kick off any more 20-year wars, we step back and be like, well, what are we going to do with our community members who are going to come back and who are going to be impacted by this? And hopefully we do a better job. You know, one of my, a gentleman I've never met, but I've learned a lot from, he was asked, or he gave this example. So he said, if the news came to me and interviewed me and asked me what the state of mental health in the U.S. right now, and they said I could only answer in one word, it would be good. If they said, well, that's not enough, we need 2 words, he'd say, well, it's not good. If they asked me for 3 words, it'd be, well, not good enough. And I think that's where I'm looking at how we're treating mental health, how we're treating our veterans. It's good, it's not good enough. And I think that things like this, it's community spun, that's heading towards better. I don't think there's any pinnacle where we're going to reach the best we can possibly do, but we can do better. And it might not come 100% from the federal government. It might come from community spun things like North Idaho Veterans, and having multiple organizations that offer a little bit different flavor, but also at the end of the day offer community, offer relationships, offer direction and purpose, and then we're doing better.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I'm so grateful that you guys are here and that you guys are doing so much for our community and specifically for the community of veterans. And just the last thing I need from you guys is, how do people get in touch with you? Where do they visit your website? How do they make donations? How do they, you know, get invited to a breaking bread ceremony? What's that like?
Well, we're currently, hopefully this week, definitely by middle of February, we're hoping to have the website up for North Idaho Veterans, which then again, it's a hub, so it can direct you towards Warriors Rest, towards the vet center, towards any of the other organizations we're involved with. We'll have really soon, again, this will almost for sure be this week, where you go to the website and it says, you know, stand by or coming soon, but there will be a newsletter to sign up for. And once you're on the newsletter, you get any of the flyers we're putting out, and we'll put out the times for the meetings. We're trying to lock down a reoccurring time, but with so many organizations, it's been tough to say, hey, we're going to do it every third Thursday. So right now we're more just shooting for a time when most of the organizations can be there. So it's not consistent yet. But really, please go to the website. It's www.northidahoveterans.com. And we will have that up and going as soon as humanly possible.
And when it's up, it'll have a calendar, and so that calendar will have North Idaho Veterans events where we're coming together, and then it'll have the individual things that are happening within the different organizations.
I love it. As CREC is trying to be the hub of all the nonprofits, can we share that calendar on our website and lead to you guys?
Heck yeah.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being here today, and just thank you for all the work you guys do in our community.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. For more information, you can go to crecIdaho.com. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again soon.